Hey everyone, and welcome to the Outliers YouTube channel and our program Criminal Mischief, the Art and Science of Crime Fiction. I'm your host, DP Lyle, and I'm here with my co-host and partner here, Dr. Katherine Ramsland, as you all know, forensic psychologist. She's been part of Outliers for quite some time, essentially from the beginning. So, Katherine, welcome.
Great to be here again.
And today, we have a very special guest, a gentleman that we've both known for a long time. Uh, God, almost 2 decades, it seems like. Chris Grall, who is an expert in weapons, ex-special forces, and has written a wonderful book on weapons and ammunition and things like that for writers. Chris, welcome.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's good to have you here. I mean, you are the go-to guy, and you do know more about weapons than anybody I know. Yeah, let's talk about weapons. I mean, kind of give us the landscape, the nomenclature, because writers get it wrong all the time. So let's talk about what kinds of weapons we're talking about here.
Well, in the book, in Trigger Guard, my book, I covered all of them because I wanted the writers out there to have a one-stop shop. If not the answer to their question, the way they can find the answer to their question. So, the problem is there's just so many different types of guns that it's it's hard to find a starting place. But I think that semi-automatic handguns are probably the most problematic firearm in not only written fiction but in movies and TV as well.
Why is that?
Problematic in what way?
What are they doing wrong?
Well, the problem is there are so many different configurations for a semi-automatic handgun. And if I'd been thinking, I would have pulled out all my toys and demonstrated. But uh, there are semi-autos that have a safety that should be used all the time. There are semi-autos that are double action to single action, like uh, like a Beretta Model 92, and they have a safety, but it's a decocking safety. So when you fire the first round, the hammer's back, and when you put the safety on, it decocks the hammer and makes the gun more safe. Uh, and then there are guns that don't have a safety but are double to single action, and they have a decocking lever to put it back into double action mode. And then there are the guns that have a decocking lever and a safety. So, you're the semi-automatic firearm comes in so many different flavors. It's difficult to keep track of them all.
But aren't there common ones that you see writers using that you'd like to at least address, some of the things that they're doing with those common ones?
Actually, I do have a training aid right here. Let me let
Don't
me do
shoot
this real
me.
quick. Now I'm back. So the uh, the Glocks are almost ubiquitous now, and a lot of law enforcement agencies use Glocks now. And the biggest sin, uh, as far as Glocks go, is putting the Glock on safe. Now, this happens because when a writer is doing research on a striker fired pistol, they these pistols don't have a hammer and may or may not be equipped with a manual safety, in addition to the trigger safety. So, uh, if the writer is researching a Glock, just looking it up online, and they see trigger safety, they may automatically think that, excuse me, they may automatically think that it's a positive safety that can be set on the gun. but it's not. And so this is a training pistol I have here. It's completely inert, but it does have the trigger safety on it. So that's this little doohickey right here. And you can only pull the trigger if your finger, or the trigger will only function if your finger's on the trigger and pushing this little safety down. And that's a trigger safety. And in the firearms community, it doesn't count. The same thing goes for a grip safety. In a lot of the Colt 1911s, on the back strap here, there's a little lever, and when you grab the gun, it depresses that lever, and that's a grip safety. So the grip safety and the trigger safety don't count as far as the firearms community is concerned. And if you say he put the Glock on safe, you will get called out every day of the week and twice on Sundays.
Now, revolvers don't have safeties either, right?
Not all of them.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Some do. In Europe, there was a fad back in the late 1800s, maybe early 1900s, where revolvers had a safety in Europe. But since then, that's kind of fallen out of fashion because most revolvers are double action.
Yeah, what
But
would it even look like? I can't envision it.
well, can I share screen with you? I have a couple of
Sure. Absolutely.
let me I had to switch all my stuff around here. Let's go. I have the book up in PDF format on my desktop here. And I just need to navigate to the right one. Okay, there we are. And now I have to come back this way. And we'll go to that.
The mad scientist at work.
And did I share it?
Yes, there you go.
Okay, so there's a safety lever right here on the frame of the pistol, and it's kind of opposite of the way most safeties work now. But you just flick it down into one position or up into the. So you flick it down to be in the safe position. You flick it up to be in the fire position, and that's it. It's safety on the gun. Now, there is a modern manufacturer of cowboy guns. How do I unshare?
You should
So
be
I
up at the top, just a little button that says unshare, stop share. It's probably red highlighted.
Sometimes you have to move your cursor around before it shows.
Okay, wait. There we go. And now I want to come. I want to stop doing that. Technology, I hate you. You can tell that I'm not very versed in Zoom. Dang it.
I think as host, we can unshare you. Is that right,
I
Doug?
think so. I think so. Let me see if I can do that.
Participants, Chris.
Stop sharing.
Yeah,
There you go.
we got you.
You're off
Okay.
now. You're back. You're
Now
back to nominal.
Thank you.
So, but in modern fiction, a revolver does not have a safety. Also,
correct.
it does not eject shells.
Correct. Now,
like a
the one
semi-automatic
exception
would.
is there's a manufacturer of single action revolvers, and they have a safety lever on
Who
the back
makes
of
them?
on the back of the gun. I should have known you'd ask me that.
Well, I mean, I think most writers are going to either say they got a Glock or they got a
Yeah, right.
revolver.
And
They
so,
got a Smith and Wesson.
yeah,
That's
and
what,
that goes back to one of the overarching themes of Trigger Guard is don't pick out the oddballs. Pick the most common firearm that you can think of, because there's a guy like me sitting in a basement someplace that the minute you say the bad guy pulled out their Grendel P10, I'm like, oh, Grendel P10, huh? And I will listen for the mistake, or I'll listen to the passage, and then I'll look up the Grendel P10, look at the way it operates, and go, maybe not. So people will look up the oddballs almost automatically. But you say he pulled his Glock out of the holster, and everybody's like, yeah, I know what a Glock is.
plus, it
So
narrows the suspect list. Who would have access to that, where it would have been purchased, what's the provenance of the weapon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's
right.
like you don't drive a red car as a getaway car. You know?
Exactly. But it's interesting that you bring that up. I had a question from a writer at one time, and she said, "I need a pistol that Ernest Hemingway could have owned, or that an Ernest Hemingway buff would own, and I need confusion in the ammunition."
Hmm.
And I was like, "Oh, I'm all over this one because this is going to be fun." And after a little bit of research, I settled on the FN Model 1910, which I'm not sure if they still make them or not, but the FN Model 1910 fired. Oh, and the reason Hemingway would have owned this gun is because it's the same gun that Gavril Princip used to shoot Prince Ferdinand and kick off World War I.
Okay.
So Hemingway would have known about this gun, and it fires the 9mm short, which is basically the same bullet as a 380 for us here in the U.S. But so it would be 9mm short or 9mm Kurs, and if the two characters that were planning this crime or whatever didn't know that Kurs stood for short, and your average 9mm Luger bullet wouldn't fit in this gun, then they can have their ammunition confusion.
Hmm.
So the provenance that you were just talking about is really important when you're picking that firearm. If it's common, you can pick it up in any gun store. But if it's important to your plot, then an oddball may be very important. And then you really need to get those details right with the oddballs.
Right. Exactly.
I
They
was
really
listening.
need your book, these writers. They really need your
Exactly.
book.
I hope so. I was listening to one of your one of the Outliers episodes just recently, and you were talking about dang it. Oh, everything serves the story. Characters are important, but the stuff that's in the book serves the characters and their relationships. Firearms are the same way. If you've got a firearm that, let's say, the main character is mugged in one of the opening scenes, and I point the pistol at you. I'm the bad guy. Point the pistol at you, and that gun never shows up ever again. You don't need to name it. You don't need
Right.
to know what type of gun it is, because you're in an alley, it's dark, you're more interested in what the character can do. And I'll tell you honestly, if you've got a gun pointed at you,
Yeah.
you probably are not interested in, oh, that's a Kel-Tec P30. It has a 30 round magazine and it's chambered in 22 long rifle. No, I'm more interested in not getting shot.
Exactly. You're looking at that hole of the muzzle.
Right. And it looks
Saying,
like
how do I get away from that? Yeah,
it looks like a train tunnel.
exactly.
But everything, every weapon choice should serve the character or the plot, and any gun scene should advance both of those things as well. And that's one of the biggest things I have in the book is, hey, everything, you're the god of your universe. You can do whatever you want in it as long as it serves character or plot.
Yep. So you mentioned that Glock was probably the most common. I know a lot of agencies use Glocks of various levels in law enforcement. Why is that? Why did they become so popular? Is it because they're reliable, they're accurate, they're cheap? I mean, what's the reason that they became so popular?
Uh, I think probably the main reason would have to be uh, that law enforcement agencies wanted to get away from a gun that had two different types of trigger pull. So, for the longest time, the Sig Sauer P226 was the go-to firearm for a lot of police agencies, along with the Beretta 92F. And those pistols are double action for the first shot, and then the action cycles, and every shot after that is single action. But that trigger pull changes because the hammer is cocked back. So where you'd have a long first pull for that first shot, your second shot is not very much. So I think in order to simplify training and familiarity with the firearms, they went. Police agencies decided to go to guns that had a simpler mechanism.
Makes sense.
That's just my thoughts on it.
Well, that makes sense that they would do that. Now we see a lot of times they'll say it was a revolver, but then they'll have shell casings that are found, and obviously that's not going to happen. But I've read it, and yeah, I think I've even seen it in movies. You'd think in this day and age that that would not happen. Um,
Well, it
is that?
could if you did a reload.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's
People
true.
people need to reload.
Right.
But is that why a lot of the bad guys use revolvers so they don't have to worry about picking up the pieces, as it were?
If I were to commit a crime, I would probably, if I were to commit a murder, I would probably do it with a revolver. And that way, in the adrenaline of the moment, you don't have to worry about hunting down that piece of brass that
It's
goes,
under the refrigerator.
yeah, it goes flipping off into space and you never find it again. Unless it's that one piece of brass that goes down your shirt and,
Yes.
gives you a nice burn.
Yeah.
But which,
What kind of revolver would you pick?
any kind, yeah,
Any.
yeah. So I get asked sometimes, what's your favorite gun? And my answer is always facetious, but it's true. My favorite gun is the one in my hand when I need it. Uh, quick story. I held a guy at gunpoint who was trying to break into my house. Uh, the next day, I was going to the range. I had my shotgun in the car. I had my rifle in the car. I had all my pistols in the car, except for my tiny little pants gun. That was in my backpack in the bedroom. And when we heard the big commotion and all this stuff was going on, I couldn't really get into the garage without leaving my wife and all that stuff. So I pulled out this little teeny tiny belly gun, and that night, my favorite pistol was the Car K9.
So my question here is, so the guy's breaking your house, why didn't you just shoot him? Assume there's more than one of them. That's
Well,
always been my assumption. You come into my house, I'm assuming you've got accomplices. So you're going
uh,
down. Then we'll worry about where your buddies are.
the uh, the circumstance at the time, I was a training aide for SWAT teams for many, many years, and I'd been in over 10,000 entries at that point as the bad guy. So the cops come in, they shoot at me, I shoot at them, and then I would have to tell them all the things that they did right or wrong. So I was very comfortable in that kind of an environment. So we heard this loud noise across the street. It sounded like a domestic incident. I don't know. So I started getting dressed to go outside and see what was up. My wife's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm going out there. I'm going to see what's going on." She said, "Well, shouldn't we call 911?" I said, "Why?" "Because there's a scary noise? Because somebody's yelling across the street and beating on a car or whatever?" "No, I'm going out there." And right about the time I was tying my shoes, my wife says, "Oh my God, he's coming at the house." I was like, "What?" And there was a big crash at the front door. And my wife looks at me and she goes, "Well, can I call 911 now?" I said, "Well, yeah." And the guy came around to my back door, which was a glass light door. You know, it's one of those, it's a wood door, but it has the huge window in it. And I flicked on all the lights out the back and I stepped into the room and I had a beautiful sight picture right on his face. And it was a kid. It was a kid that had gotten a hold of some bad drugs and he was standing there trying to intimidate me. And I'm like, "Dude, it's Sunday or Monday. I'll be on, I'm going to face scarier people than you tomorrow." And I'm in this environment. I'm comfortable here. And I had a sight picture and he was still through the door. So I personally had no reason to shoot him. And so I exercised some self-restraint.
Good.
And the police came and they gave him the Baker Act and they put him in the hospital for the night. So I'm glad I didn't. I'm really glad I didn't.
So your
Not that
book is so comprehensive. What did you have any surprises in your research?
Somewhat. So it was like making a clean spot. Uh, you when I first got the idea to write the book, I told my wife, "I hope I can get to 100 pages." And so I initially it was just going to be the main types of firearm, rifles, lever action, pump action, bolt action, automatics. And then I was like, okay, I started doing more and more research. And I thought, well, you know what? The guy who got me into all of this was writing a book at the time. And he said, "Hey, I need to know about some muzzle loaders, for 1800s kind of stuff." So I thought, you know what? I might as well just throw the muzzle loaders in. It won't take that much. And it just started to steamroll where the more research I did, the more interesting stuff I found. And, you make a clean spot and you're like, "Oh, well, I've got to do this now too. And I've got to do that." And I made a decision that just came back and bit me right in the butt. Uh, between 1850-ish, I'm lying to you. Hold on. I'm lying to you. Where is it? Where is it? So right around 1818, the modern cartridge was developed. And there was an 80-year stretch where people were inventing stuff. The evil geniuses were hard at work, and there were all kinds of crazy designs happening. And one of the designs was something called the needle gun. And it was a paper cartridge with the primer in the middle of the cartridge. And when you fired the gun, the hammer dropped on a needle that would poke all the way into the cartridge and hit the primer. And those were needle guns. And I said, you know what? I'm not even gonna get into this. I've realized now that I have more than 100 pages, and now I'm into the self-editing and limiting phase, you know, that all that cool stuff that you researched for your fiction story, the stuff that you leave on the cutting room floor, that's where I was. And I was like, I wrote a throwaway paragraph that covered 80 years. And 3 days before the weekend before I published, I got an email from my buddy Scott, who wrote the foreword to this book. And he said, "Hey, I'm writing stuff for my foreword, and you don't have anything on the integrated paper cartridge." I've looked, because he had a copy of the book. And I said, "Yeah, I don't. I consciously decided not to do that." He's like, "Well, tell me about the integrated paper cartridge." And I thought, oh my God, the guy who's writing the foreword to my book, who penned this lovely foreword, is asking me about something that I purposefully left out. And I pretty much locked myself into my office, did a bunch of follow-on research, looked at what I already had, and rewrote a full chapter, 2 or 3 pages. And then the cascading effects happened after that, because everything's cross-referenced in here. And I had to go back and make sure that all my page number references were right and all of the links worked. And I worked pretty much for 3 days straight getting it right. And fortunately, I published through KDP and Amazon, and I could make all of those changes on the fly. There was no worry about, 1,000 books going out to bookstores, because then it would have just had to be right second edition. So, but yeah, I found more and more stuff, and the more stuff I found, the more I wanted to include, and it just started to grow out of control. I think in my introduction to the book, I say, "Hey, I'm staying away from all the oddballs. I'm trying to stay away from oddballs because you shouldn't use them.
Right.
Don't use oddballs." But there are a couple oddballs in the book because I just couldn't resist.
How often do you get questions or queries from writers who are writing historical stuff and need historical weapons, or is it mostly modern? I'm sure it probably mostly is, but
I have not had, apart from the Hemingway pistol, I have not been hit up for anything historical. And even then, I'd say after 1920, all your firearms are pretty much going to be modern firearms. Now, if you wanted to talk about the 7-barrel volley gun, we're gonna have to have a talk, and I'll have to do some more research. I know about it. I know it exists, but do I know everything about it? No, it's impossible. Impossible. I can't find it. It's in my bookshelf behind me. There, I have Jane's firearms guide, and it has like 500 guns in it.
yeah.
And I pulled out my trusty Jane's to look up a gun, and it wasn't in there, and it should have been. So, historical firearms, oddball firearms, they're just so hard to track down sometimes. And that's another reason, if I said, if you had a character in 1865 and she's getting off the train, or she's whoever she is, and she reaches in her purse and she pulls out a 7-barrel volley gun, or she pulls out a Colt Peacemaker, or she pulls out a Derringer. You've got these 3 choices. which one's going to be the easiest to write about? Which one's going to be the easiest to research? And which one is going to send all of those firearms aficionados scrambling towards Wikipedia?
Yeah.
So,
I would vote her. She would have the Derringer, so it would fit in her skirt.
That's what I think.
That's right.
Exactly. A
You're
peacemaker
picking
might be a little hard to get out of your bloomers.
That's
You know?
right. That's exactly why those three examples were the ones I chose.
Well, I have a Japanese World War II rifle that my dad picked up during the war or whatever, and it's a 31 caliber, which is
Okay.
interesting. They could use our 30 caliber ammo when they captured it, but we couldn't use theirs.
Yeah, and you know that's
Very clever.
that's the reasoning between the it's the reasoning behind the Russian 5.45 ammunition is so that NATO armies couldn't use their rifles if they picked them up.
Right. Right.
Yeah, ammunition is the development of ammunition is one of the most interesting things that came about in my research. The way they came up with this stuff is just amazing to me.
From the Nobel Prize on down.
From the Nobel Prize on down. And then the patent wars over who developed the primer first were just amazing. You know, they were the European patents and American patents, and it was just nuts.
Have you considered writing any fiction yourself using some of this?
So I have a 104,000 word manuscript in the realm of speculative fiction, and it has one firearm in it.
Yeah.
One. And it's never fired. And the hero, one of my main characters, has access to firearms, but because of the way the story evolves, they never use them. Never use them. Now I have another project that I'm working on now, and guns might figure into that one pretty heavily.
I would think you could create a character who knows all this stuff about guns, who could be a collector or run a gun museum or something that would figure into a plot.
Yeah, easily. And what's funny is you guys flatter me by calling me the gun expert, but there are so many people out there who know so much more about firearms and firearm history than I do. I was in a conversation last year, and the guy knew all kinds of stuff about World War II rifles. And, you know, he was like, well, you know, the M1 carbine was originally made by, you know, one of the manufacturers was Singer, the sewing machine company. And I did know that one. But he was rattling off all this stuff because that was his hobby. And those people are fonts of information, and they should be sought out. Where Trigger Guard comes in is because that font of information over there doesn't know how to tell a writer
exactly
how to write about guns. And that's
But they
only
make
because...
good characters.
Pardon?
They make good characters.
Oh, they make great characters. They are amazing people, and you know, they can outfit your main character or help your main character out or be their own main character quite easily. Yeah, I could see where you would have a firearms expert that, or maybe a police officer who's a firearms aficionado who does tons of research, but a lot of that is really specialized. You know, the guns of World War I, the guns of the Civil War. Oh my God, the guns of the Civil War. So many different firearms were used in the Civil War. just
Yeah, and the mini ball changed everything.
exactly.
It changed everything. That was
Well,
the first modern ballistics, really. I mean, it really changed warfare.
well, the thing is in 1865 or in the 1860s, there were so many better guns out there than the cap lock musket. And the Army didn't want to change over to them because they were afraid that the soldiers would fire too fast and they'd run out of ammo. That was the
Interesting.
main crux behind why they didn't adopt that firearm, because, or any of those firearms, because the boys would shoot them too fast and they'd run out of ammo.
Wow.
Well, I mean, when you talk about the experts and people who know more than you, it's kind of the way I feel about forensics for dummies. There's people out there that know a whole lot more, but I could dumb it down because I'm from Alabama and I could make it where people can understand it. And I think that's what you've done with Trigger Guard is you've taken all this data and put it together in a palatable form. And I think that's what 99.999% of writers need is that palatable uh, approach and understanding of a topic so that
Well,
they can use it in a story without sounding like, Professor Moriarty, they don't want to be that.
well, the other thing that I've found in when you research a firearm, you are going to run into a whole world of people uh, with varying political standpoints on firearms and the Second Amendment and all of that stuff. And I avoid it like the plague in Trigger Guard because the writer doesn't want that. If they want to find that, they can find that easily. They want the information to get the detail right and then move on without breaking the flow of their writing. And I purposefully leave out any kind of stuff about Second Amendment, gun rights,
Sure.
all that silliness, because it has no place in this book. The writer can make the decision to involve their characters in whatever political point of view they want, um, but it has no business in my advice to a writer.
They want to know what kind of gun James Bond has and Dirty Harry and Matt Dillon. They want to get that right. And that's it's like I always say it's like horseshoes, hand grenades, and thermonuclear warfare, close counts.
That's right. Luck counts too.
Yeah, luck counts too. So tell me, where can people get your book? Because I
Well,
know the writers are going to want this. It's fantastic. I mean, every writer should have it. It's
thank
because
you.
you always use weapons in your stories because there's always dead bodies and they got to get dead somehow. You know,
Yeah, you need something to poke the hole in them.
exactly. If you want to use a knife, that's fine, but guns seem to be better.
Well, the book, obviously you can get it through Amazon, but it's available through Ingram Spark, and it, each of the printed versions has their own ISBN. So you can order a hardback. It's exorbitantly expensive, but you could order the hardback or the paperback from your favorite local bookstore. Go to your favorite independent bookstore, have them search Trigger Guard or Chris Grall, and it'll pop right up. Or you can go through Amazon. I care not how you buy my book.
Exactly. Well, I see you got a nice cover blurb from our friend John Land.
Yeah,
That's
John
great.
was
Yeah,
John was really nice in putting that together. Now the ebook version is different. That's only available through the Kindle store, and try as I may, I cannot get the file size down enough to put it through the Apple or the Google Play stores. Uh, it's just the book is just crammed full of illustrations, because I'm a visual person, and if you're reading about how something functions, you should be able to see how it functions. and you need to be able to see it on the page where I'm talking about it. And because of that, it's a fixed layout ebook like a PDF, and the file size is just abominably huge. But Kindle handled it okay, so I'm happy with that. And honestly, I think that as a desktop companion, the Kindle book is probably better for writers. But I wrote it so that you could read it straight through and it would tell the story. So you can use it either way, as a straight read or as just a research tool.
Absolutely. Reference tool. Well, as we wrap this up, Katherine, anything else you are curious about?
No, I wanted to get Chris on because I'd seen some presentations at Sleuthfest that he did, and I thought he was a valuable resource for writers. So I'm happy you were.
Yeah, we could do the gunfight one next time if you guys were interested in it.
Yeah, that was a good one.
There's nothing wrong with a good gunfight.
Yeah. And the big so well, we'll have to save it for later if we're running out of time because
No. Any final thoughts? That's it. That's
the 99% solution for for writers.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you're writing I know writers who are afraid to use guns because of the bad reviews. The gun aficionados out there will just tear them apart if they get the one thing wrong. So they never name the firearm, right? It's the pistol. The pistol, the pistol, the pistol. And you lose a lot of variety by not naming the firearm. So if you find the firearm that you want to use and name it, so the Glock 19 or the Sig Sauer P226, now, quite like you do with a character, like, okay, Chris Grall, the gray-haired physician, right? Chris Grall, the gray-haired physician. Everybody knows that character, right? You've named that character out on chapter 1. Well, you can call him Chris. You can call him Dr. Grall. You can call him the physician, the gray-haired man. You have all of these appellations that you can use to break up your writing. By naming the firearm and reducing your actions to the most basic of actions, then you open yourself up to something that is a little more palatable, reads a little bit cleaner, has more variation to it. So if I load the gun, unload the gun, aim the gun, fire the gun, holster the gun, boom, what more do I need? So, but if it's always the gun, the gun, the gun, then it just becomes too repetitive. So if I say he drew the Beretta, he looked down the sights, he fired his 9mm. So all I need to do is have the nomenclature of the gun correct, the caliber correct, and use basic actions.
Right.
Then that's 99% of the battle. The only thing you have to worry about after that is whether or not the firearm has a manipulatable safety. And that's it. Now, on the other hand, so if I were using Glocks, I would not use a Glock 22 chambered in 40 caliber or a Glock 44 chambered in 22 caliber. I would watch the appellation that I used there, because if I say he pulled his Glock 40, well, is that a Glock 40 or a Glock 40 caliber?
Yeah.
You've got some confusion that's possibly baked in there that you'd want to avoid. And that's it. That's the 99% solution. Go forth and conquer.
Good advice. Well, Chris, this has been great, and everybody should get the book. Everybody should get Trigger Guard. Every crime writer should, because it's fantastic. Really appreciate you being here. Really appreciate you sharing your knowledge. It's always good to see you. It's been too long, and hopefully our paths will cross again very soon.
If I can hammer out the BoucherCon possibility,
Yep.
then I'll see you there.
We will be there.
I'm looking forward to that. And if you end up in Killer Nashville, let me know.
I'll be at Killer Nashville.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
at
yeah.
least we know we've got. At least we'll have Nashville.
Yeah, exactly. We'll always have Nashville.
We'll always have Nashville.
All right. Well, that should wrap up this episode of Criminal Mischief, the Art and Science of Crime Fiction here on the Outliers YouTube channel. I want to thank Chris for being here and sharing his knowledge with it. I want to thank Katherine. Always a pleasure to hang out with you. And until next time, and we'll be back with more. Keep reading, keep writing, keep having fun, and don't get caught.